Hey, good morning. God's blessings to you. We are in John 9, still talking about the man who was born blind. Now, just consider this big picture view. Jesus heals a man who was born blind. And who could possibly be upset about that? And the answer, of course, is the Pharisees. But this is our human condition. I remember a few years ago, the YouTuber Mr. Beast paid money so that I don't know 1,000 people could have their blindness fixed. It was a simple surgery. I think they had cataract, something like that. I mean, a wonderful act of charity, and of course, people got upset about it. And it just reminds me of this situation. Jesus heals somebody blind. People get upset. Famous YouTuber pays money so that people can have a simple cataract surgery, and then people start calling him out because he's ableist and things like this. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So why are the Pharisees so upset? And this really gets to the core issue. It's because they are rejecting who Jesus is. Now, this text that we're going to read today here in John 9 reveals, hey, this happened on the Sabbath day. And big picture view of the Sabbath day, it's all about rest. Well, what could be more restful than Jesus healing a man? So they're missing the entire point of the Sabbath. But let's just dive in here. So, verse 13, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now, it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Now, they're going to be really legalistic about this and say, whoa, hey, you made mud. That's breaking the Sabbath. And you can read other stories about this. Jesus will be called out for this, and he'll say, hey, which one of you, if your ox fell into a ditch on a Sabbath day, will not pull it out? and of course, the answer is none of them would leave their ox there. They would pull him out, even though it's work, because they understand, hey, it's worse to let my animal suffer here in the ditch. That's really against the spirit of the Sabbath. Now, of course, you could go the other direction and not obey the Sabbath at all. That's not good. And we see this with the Israelites and the manna. They don't pay attention to God's command. No work on the Sabbath. So I'm going to provide twice as much bread. You go and you take twice as much. Well, they don't listen that time either. So I do think it is helpful to think of it as you got two ditches. Don't push that metaphor too far, of course. But anything Jesus does is going to be fulfilling of the law. Okay, so verse 15. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And this is amazing. It's like he told you. He detailed it, how it happened, and they still don't believe him because they want it to be some other explanation. They're just looking for him to say, well, I wasn't born blind, or he said abracadabra, but he didn't make mud. I have the feeling they kind of just want to skirt away from this. They don't want Jesus to have done the miracle, but now they got to deal with the consequences. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I wash, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. And of course, they're talking about Jesus. That's this man. But there is some ambiguity here. Remember, last week when we were reading John 9, they kept asking this man, you're not the guy who was born blind, was you? And he kept saying, I am. So at this point, the identity of Christ and this former blind man, they are wrapped up together. So if Jesus is from God, then the man formerly born blind, he's also from God. And if he's not from God, it's the same thing there. Now, remember Nicodemus, all the way back in John 3, what does he say to Jesus? Teacher, we know that you are a man from God, for no one can do these signs unless he is from God. So Nicodemus recognizes something's going on here. These people want to say he's not from God because he's doing miracles, he's doing signs on the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And that's an interesting question, because remember how this chapter starts. The disciples asked, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So there is this question, hey, what's sin have to do with this? And of course, the answer is, well, everything. We're all born sinful. But remember our mature discussion, not necessarily it's one specific sin that leads to something disastrous. Now, sometimes it is, but in this case, it wasn't. He wasn't born blind for a specific sin. And there was a division among them. Hey, Christ says, I have come to bring a sword on the earth. Christ brings division. And either you believe in him or you don't. He divides the sheep and the goats. So they said to the blind man, they just won't leave this poor guy alone. He starts seeing, and he's already on the seat of judgment here. What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes? He said he is a prophet. Now, you remember last time, and this would have been, I think, verse 12, they asked him where he was, and he said, I do not know. And I know it's a different question of where he is and who he is, but I think these questions go hand in hand. So notice the progression. He first says, I do not know where he is, to now, what is he saying? He is a prophet. That's true. And again, this isn't the full-throated confession of who Jesus is. More has to be said. But is Jesus a prophet? And the answer is yes. Of course, the answer is more than a prophet, but not less than one. Verse 18, the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight. Now, we've talked about this several times, that term, the Jews, used by John way more than the other Gospels. Notice this happens quite frequently where the Pharisees are equated with the Jews. And John's doing this on purpose, and the purpose is irony. Jesus is a Jew, of course. He's showing that Jesus' own people, who should believe in him because they were given the law and the prophets who spoke about Christ, they reject him. But notice this is clearly a reference to the Pharisees. So oftentimes this term, the Jews, while referring to, yes, a people group, is more specific, mostly talking about the Pharisees and the leaders of the Jews, until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. I mean, you see where this is like a courtroom. Now they're calling the witnesses. Now, this is a big picture view of John chapter 9, and this is a good exercise for us to do. This is why an important translation of the Bible is so important. But if you count the times that the word parents shows up in John 9, it's 6. Now, sometimes 6 is a good number, as in the days of creation. God creates man on the 6th day. But when we count how many times the name of Jesus is counted here, which is 7, well, then you realize, okay, Jesus' number is 7. That's God's number. Okay, that's right. It's perfection. God rests. Hey, there you go. Sabbath day is the 7th day. God rests on the 7th. While the parents, hey, they fall one short of Jesus. So they kind of take care of their son, but when it comes to suffering for him, they're not willing to do that. So here, the number 6, it falls short. And you could think 666. Part of the reason why that number is used in Revelation is it falls short of the glory of God, which would be 777. Now, there's more going on with that number. Probably a reference to Nero if you add up the arithmetic value of his name. But this is not on Revelation, so we'll continue. Verse 19, and asked them, is this your son? That's another thing, another word that pops up. And 3 times, interesting, 3, big Trinitarian number, the word son. And it's going to be in reference to this man, but also to Jesus, the Son of Man. Who do you say was born blind? How then does he now see? So now they're asking his parents about him. And now they know the story. They've probably talked to their son. They know what's going on. They know it's Jesus. Verse 20, his parents answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind. So that's what they do know. They know something. Verse 21, but how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age, he will speak for himself. Now, I wrote the word agnostic next to this. It means no knowledge. Now, I looked at the Greek, and the word for do not know is a different word, oida. But John uses terms interchangeably often, so sometimes it's hard to tell if he's making a distinction between gnosis, which is where we get the word agnostic, means knowledge, and then oida, to know. Now, that's the verbal form, so they go hand in hand. Oida is, where not gnosis is the noun. But this is a lot of people's confession today. They're agnostic, meaning no knowledge. We don't know. So who do you say that Jesus is? Who do you say created the world? And what do people say? Well, we don't know. and that's problematic. That falls short. Remember, these parents fall short. you can't say we don't know. And this is what Jesus really presses the people on when they come to trick him. They say, who gave you this authority? And Jesus says, well, I'll answer your question if you answer mine. John's baptism, that's John the Baptist, where did it come from? From heaven or from earth? And what do they say? They say, well, we don't know. And how does Jesus respond? He says, neither will I tell you. And that's the divine silent treatment. Those are the worst words of judgment, where God doesn't even speak to them anymore. And so we have to be ready to make a full-throated confession of who Jesus is. And saying, I don't know, when it comes to who Jesus is, it's not good. It's really bad, because you're not willing to have the guts to say, well, Jesus didn't do it. You're not willing to say that Jesus isn't God, but you also don't have the courage to confess that Jesus is God. And you see this in the book of Revelation, again popping up with lukewarm Laodicea. Jesus says, oh, that you are warm or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Verse 22, his parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus, and I highlighted the tiny little B there, that footnote, because if you go and count how many times Jesus' name pops up in John 9, you might get 8 times if you're using the ESV. But then you notice this tiny little footnote. It's actually the pronoun. And this is helpful. This is why the notes can be really helpful, is if you're counting how many times a word pops up and a translation puts in a noun for the pronoun, that screws up your word count. So I appreciate them having the footnote here, because this will make it 8 times, and I like the number 8, but it's actually 7 how many times the name Jesus shows up in John 9. So if anyone should confess him to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. And scholars have noted that this is a prevalent theme in John, being thrown out of the synagogue. This is probably what the early Christians then were dealing with. And we know this according to Paul. He goes to synagogues, preaches the gospel, oftentimes doesn't get success. They throw him out. So what this might indicate is a later date for the Gospel of John. I'm not dogmatic on it. I don't have a dog in the fight. But this probably indicates who John is writing to. Certainly all Christians, but there is this element. He's writing to Jewish Christians who have been kicked out of the synagogue. And this is an encouraging message. They kicked Jesus out. They are not happy with this man who was born blind. Have courage, because Christ is with you. Verse 23, therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So they're afraid of the temporal consequences of speaking the truth of what actually happened, that Jesus healed this man. And, I mean, heaven forbid that they would make a full-throated confession that Jesus is the Son of God. All right, well, this has been a portion of John 9. We will continue in it next week. Until then, God bless you, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.